All right, so now that we've gone through some of the basic biases and sampling, I want to mention just a couple other things. So, non-response bias, response bias, data entry errors, those are all types of non-sampling error. They're bias that you're getting based on errors that are being made on somebody's part. And those are all called non-sampling error. Under coverage, basically messing up, right? So there is another type of error, which is called sampling error, which is not to be confused with sampling bias. Sampling bias is because you didn't take a good enough sample. Sampling error is because you took a fine sample, or a not fine sample, who knows. But because it's a sample, it will always be just a little bit off, no matter what. It's not the full population. So it's always going to be slightly different than what the full population would be. That's sampling error. Not sampling bias, which is you screwed up making the sample in the first place. But sampling error is what's going to happen no matter how good or how bad your sample is. It's always a sample. And because it's a sample, it's never quite as good as real life or the full population. All right. A newspaper advertisement from USA Today, the television show, once said, should handgun control be tougher? You call the shots in a special call-in poll tonight. If yes, call 1-900 blah blah blah. If no, call 1-900 blah blah blah. Charge is 50 cents for the first minute. 12,233 people called in to give their views. Explain why this poll is almost certainly biased. Well, where do I begin? Because it cost 50 cents, only people who cared enough to spend money on the issue would call. For that matter, only people who read the ad in USA Today and had money, time, and a phone would call in. Of course, they'd also have to care enough about the topic to even bother, right? Which means, of course, it's biased. What type of bias is this? Well, there's a lot of type of bias in this, but I would say one of your first big problems is that there's sampling bias because it's a convenience sample of only people who bothered to call. Inherent in this, to be honest, is a little bit of non-response bias, because response bias, all the people who are not calling in might have very different opinions from those who do. Which is really common, honestly, in convenience samples like this anyway, is that because it's convenience, it's possible that you're not getting a full response when you ask this. But 12,233, that's a huge number, right? Gallup usually polls around 1,000 people. Gallup, of course, is the international polling agency that works with, CNN and Fox and NPR and PBS and things like that. All right. So what I want to say is that, yep, it's really big. So a lot of people cared to call, but it doesn't make it a good sample. It's still a terrible convenient sample and shouldn't be used to gauge, I can spell, gauge anything about public opinion. It really shouldn't. It's so poorly done. No one should do that. It's the kind of thing that they do with internet polling all the time. To get a better gauge of what people think about gun control, what should you do? Randomly call 1,000 to 2,000 adult voters in the U.S. and ask them their opinions. That's what Gallup does. That's what CNN does. That's what news organizations do. And that's the best way we've got right now. There are other methods available too, but that's the best for us.